Hello and welcome to the first Q&A episode. I got a ton of awesome questions on Twitter. Thank you all for sending those in. If you're not already following me on Twitter, that's at Eliason, and I'm really excited to dive into these today. There are a bunch of sections, so feel free to jump around based on what you're interested in. We're going to talk about YouTube, Growth Machine, my marketing agency, Rome and personal knowledge management, finances, SEO and content marketing, personal type stuff, and then some other just like random fun topics. So let's go ahead and dive in. First up is YouTube questions. How did you go from 0 to 100 on YouTube video content so quickly? And this went through 3 phases. So there was the super rough, ugly YouTube stuff I was doing maybe back in March, where I was just putting up screen captures of me doing stuff in Rome. And those ended up driving a lot of sales for Effortless Output, my Rome course, and that's what made me think, okay, maybe I should be doing more of this YouTube stuff. Second phase was when I took Ali Abdal's Skillshare class and started talking to him about how I could figure out some of this stuff. And that was maybe the first 5-6 videos I did starting in mid-September was under his advice. And then I started working with Michael, who's been doing a lot of the strategy, helping with the editing, setting this whole system up, and that's when we've really been able to take it to 100. So my advice, if you want to get into it, is check out Ali's stuff if you want to do it solo, because he'll be a really good way to help you get started. Or if you want to hire someone to do it, we're actually kind of doing this at Growth Machine now, so you can just reach out to me or Michael on Twitter and we could talk about how we could help you do it. What is my process for creating videos? So I'm actually going to do a little bit of this in a future video because I think we've built up a pretty good system for this. But the gist of it is we come up with an idea and we keep all of our ideas in a giant Airtable. Then whenever we want to execute on an idea, we add a publication date. Then I've got like a crazy Zapier setup where as soon as a date is added, that video goes through about a 20-step zap that sets up all of the subtasks, task due dates, assignees in Asana that have to go into that card. It's got default show notes, some scripting templates, all of that stuff to make it as easy as possible. And from there, it's about a 2-week process from start to finish between writing the script, recording this, doing the editing, getting the show notes done, all of that in order to get it published. How much sooner do you think you should have started on YouTube? Well, I'm tempted to say that, 6 years ago when I started the blog, right, it would have been better to have started out earlier, but you can't change the past, right? And I'm very happy with everything that I've done over the last 6 years, and I'm just glad to be starting on this now. And then would I suggest starting on YouTube or a blog? Both. You should absolutely have the blog. If you have to pick one, pick the blog. Reason being that on YouTube, you don't totally own your audience. YouTube could just decide tomorrow to shut your channel down and take it away. But if you have a website and an email list, that's much more owned. You could always just download a CSV of all your email addresses and hold on to that if you don't trust your email service provider. And your website, even if the site gets hacked and you have to rebuild it from scratch, you still have all those backlinks and things like it. So that's a way more defensible asset than a YouTube channel. And I actually think of the YouTube channel as sort of like top of funnel awareness marketing for my site. Right now I'm using my site to grow my YouTube, but I think relatively quickly it's going to turn into YouTube helping grow my site. Let's talk about Growth Machine, my marketing agency. First question is, what advice would you give for people looking to start an agency? My advice on this is don't start an agency unless people are already asking you for help doing the thing you want to start an agency to do. The reason being is that sales is the hardest part of any service-based business, like starting an agency. So if you don't already have inbound leads coming in, it's going to be very hard for you to grow that business. I didn't start Growth Machine until multiple people and companies had already asked me to help with their content and SEO. Now, could you start one without that? Yeah, of course. It's just going to be harder. It's going to be slower. For me, the day I started Growth Machine, basically, we had 2 clients and we're doing $13,000 a month in revenue, right? Like, that's a pretty good start. And that's only because I've been giving away free advice on my blog, even some really old YouTube videos on how to do SEO. So try to do that first. Try to create enough content and awareness around your skill set that people want help with it, then start the agency. How did you get your first 2 clients? Basically the same way. I've been giving away a lot of free advice on my site and whatnot about content SEO. Eventually people said, you know what? I trust you to do this. I don't have time to do it. Can you do it for me? And I said, yeah, I'll figure it out. And that's how I got the first few clients. Okay, questions about Rome and personal knowledge management. What is with the fetish around note-taking? How do you use them? Well, one important thing to note here is that I think some people get way too excited about their note-taking app and about Rome and whatnot, and I am strongly against using a tool just for the tool's sake. It's silly to have this like crazy complex database just so you can show off how good you are at using Roam. Like, it's ridiculous. That's why Effortless Output is entirely focused on creating a database that helps you do other things, right? For me, it makes writing my Monday newsletter, the Monday Medley, way easier. It makes writing articles easier. It makes coming up with ideas for these videos way easier. So for me, it's a knowledge collection and idea generation tool. And of all the note-taking apps I've tried, Roam is just the best for doing that. I like to think of my time in my day as being in either maker time or manager time. And when I'm in maker time, I'm typically writing scripts for these videos, recording these videos like I'm doing now, or I'm in my Roam database working on articles and other ideas and being creative. But when it comes to manager time, that's when I'm in Asana and doing more project-y stuff. And Roam is not as good. It still works for it as a solo person, but having that distinction and realizing that it's a great tool for making is how you're gonna get the most out of it. How do you go about research when writing new articles? So this is something that I have maybe a different philosophy on for most people, but I think that if you have to do any research to write an article, you're not ready to write it. And what I mean by that is you should be collecting information, distilling things, understanding things on a deep level, and then the article should sort of spring forth from what you've already learned. If you notice, a lot of my articles and blog posts center around things I've done, things I've learned, things I'm thinking about, or things that I've read and studied. And I don't typically pick a topic and then say, oh, I should go research that and then write about it, because I would rather try to write and do things where I feel very knowledgeable. So essentially, when I pick a topic, I can just go through my Roam database of all of my notes on it. They're all going to be right there. And I've got a great video, it should pop up one of these corners, I can't remember how the mirroring works, about how to outline an article in under 20 minutes that kind of shows you how to do this. And that makes it super easy to pull all of my existing ideas and research together into a new piece. Do I recommend the SmartNotes system? Yes, so SmartNotes is great. I've got the book. Actually, I think it's upstairs on my desk. Anyway, great book by Sanka Arens. Inspired some of the stuff in Roam's product thinking, the whole slip box Zettelkasten method. Super interesting. I think it's a little over-engineered, so I don't do it that much anymore, but I do have a good article on how to take SmartNotes if you want to check that out. And it's kind of up to you. If it works for you, awesome, do it. If it feels too heavy, don't worry about it. You're still gonna learn a lot. Next topic is financial success. Systematic approach to achieving higher financial and social class, starting from any point without any existing resources. I love this question because it requires thinking. Okay, you've got no audience, you've got no means, nothing. What would you do? The first thing I would probably recommend is pick up the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. So I've got another video on the most important lessons from this book. It should be one of these corners again, that you can check out. And that goes through some of the best wisdom from that book on how to achieve a rich life. And something that Naval talks about in the book that I think is really good advice is you should really become a learning machine, and then you should learn how to build and how to sell. If you can become very good at self-education, at finding pieces of information, piecing an education together, not relying on someone else to teach you things, and then use your ability to self-educate in order to become very good at a method of building, whether that's coding, writing, designing, anything, and a method of selling, whether that's marketing, ads, content, video, whatever. If you can find a way to build and a way to sell, you're basically unstoppable, and that is the most surefire way to financial success. You can't wait around for a high-paying job for someone to give you a salary. You have to forge that path, and there's so much great wisdom in that book for doing it that I highly recommend checking it out. All right, let's talk about productivity. When working on so many different projects, how do you divide time? Do you have YouTube days versus growth machine days? Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit. I have maker time and manager time. So when I'm in maker time, I'm writing, recording, editing, doing all of that stuff. I like to do that in the first half of the day usually. And then manager time comes later in the day because I find it's less brain power intense. So a lot of my growth machine stuff is less maker focused, it's more manager focused, so that tends to come later in the day. And a lot of my personal brand stuff, like YouTube, writing, whatever, is the maker time, and that's earlier in the day. That makes it really easy to divvy it up. I also have certain days for certain things. Most of my growth machine meetings are on Tuesdays. Most of my recording I also do on Tuesdays. Most of my writing I do on Thursdays and Fridays. Typically write the medley, ideally Friday, but in reality, often like Monday afternoon at the last minute. But you gotta do what you gotta do. So I'm actually trying to be better about this. I'm trying to do a better job of setting up my calendar so that I know exactly what I'm doing on different days and different times to make sure that I'm doing a good job of contributing to my site, my newsletter, the YouTube channel, Growth Machine, Almanac, all the different projects. It's an ongoing process to figure out the best way to do this. I don't think I'm an expert at it yet, but I'm getting better. How do I produce so much content? There's a couple things here. One is just habit, being very good about making sure you're always working on something. And for me, what's been helpful is mixing it up between different media. So having tweet storms and videos and articles and being able to flow between those so that if I don't feel like writing, I can work on a video, so on. The other thing that's honestly really helpful is just getting to the point where you can afford help. Part of why I'm able to do so much content now is I have, Amanda, who I work with, handling so much of my email and other things so that I have more time to focus on this. Michael, who I'm working with on all of the YouTube stuff, is helping manage the editorial process and all of that. I definitely couldn't do so much like writing and video production if I hadn't gotten to a point where I could afford to work with other people to help, amplify that. So, one thing to keep in mind is when you see somebody being highly prolific who has had some measure of success, they're not doing it on their own. They're always getting help. And any ridiculous notion of the solopreneur who's doing it all on their own is mostly bullshit. Pretty much everybody has help, and if they're acting like they're doing it all on their own, they're probably lying to you. So always keep that in mind. Moving into content and SEO. What do you like about Webflow? Why should I choose it over a statically generated website for a personal or technical blog? I love Webflow. I was always really annoyed by WordPress with how slow it was, clunky it was, how hard it was to edit the design. Webflow is like this beautiful drag and drop, almost Photoshop-y editor for designing your site that gives you way more simple customization over it while creating a beautiful website, really simple CMS. It's just everything about it is great. It's a lot like Realm in that it's going to take some getting used to. There's going to be a learning curve, but if you can get through that learning curve, what you're able to do is so much greater than if you just go with the easier op. There was that great line in the Navalmanac that was basically easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life. If you take the time to learn these tough tools, you get really disproportionate returns in the long run. And so Webflow is going to be harder to pick up, but I really think it's worth it to learn because it just is so much more powerful than WordPress. How do you build an audience? What are some good ways to grow an email newsletter from scratch without a large following on other platforms? So I think the best way to build an audience is to be interesting. And that's a really tough thing to do because there's so much stuff out there for people to consume and engage with that actually creating interesting things is really tough. And the most sustainable way to create interesting things is to try to be an interesting person. So I actually think of doing a lot of the entrepreneurship or, working on this Airbnb project or even getting into YouTube as ways to go out, experience things, and then share my experiences with them through the content and newsletter and share the things I'm learning. Try to accelerate other people's education. I don't try to think of how do I grow the audience so much as how do I do interesting things and create interesting content. I find that to be a much more sustainable mindset because if you just think about how do I grow an audience, that's when you start to think about, oh, I should have an email pop up and oh, I need to be really aggressive and salesy. And I think if you're being interesting, you don't need to do as much of that stuff. That said, you want to do some of it because you want some conversion, but generally thinking about how do I do something interesting, share interesting knowledge, share useful knowledge on a topic so that people will want to follow and engage with me is going to get you a lot further. So figure out what you're really interested in, that other people will be interested in, that you could share knowledge about with the rest of the world, and that's a great way to build an audience. How much time to spend creating content versus creating product? I probably spend 80-90% of my time creating content and only 10-20% of the time creating product. I like to create products that can sell perpetually. So the Rome course is a great example of this. My book notes is another one where I kind of make it once and then it's pretty much on autopilot from then on, and then I just keep making content that drives traffic to it. The reason being that products will get outdated and other people might come and eat your lunch, but if you continue to create really great content, you're continuing to grow your audience, it's getting more valuable over time, you're going to be able to do more in the future. Okay, now we're on to some of the personal questions. What is the next thing/project for me? Well, YouTube, obviously, we're here. But second to YouTube, probably getting into more of the real estate stuff. My wife Cosette got her real estate license and she's doing a ton of real estate stuff around Austin, and that's been really exciting and cool to learn more about. And I'm excited to get into more of the investment side of that with her. We're working on the Walden project, building up that Airbnb. We're probably going to do other things like that over the next year, so super excited about getting more into that area. What are some tangible examples of the investment of marriage paying off? Emotionally, physically, financially, and spiritually? Yeah, I think that, for context, so I'm 27. My wife and I have been married for a bit over a year now. One of the best decisions I ever made. I think that a lot of young men in particular over-optimize for independence, being solo, having options, sleeping around, and that's just not a good way to have a happy life. I think people are generally afraid of choosing someone and investing in that relationship. But once you do, you can actually like build this really incredible thing together. And if you're always like trying to find the next person to hook up with, or if you're being skittish about getting into a serious relationship, you're losing the opportunity to build something really special. In the same way that if you like started a new company every 6 months, none of those companies would ever grow into anything very successful. If you're always jumping in and out of relationships, you're never actually going to be able to build a great relationship. And the great relationship isn't one that starts out perfect and just goes from there. It's the one where you're both invested in building something great together. So having that shift in mindset, I think, can be very helpful, especially again for young men, because you're just going to be so much happier once you find that person to really invest in building something together. What removal has had the greatest positive impact on your life? What removal? This is a great question. This is kind of like via negativa from Nassim Taleb and Anti-Fragile, because a lot of problems in life are easier solved by removing things than adding things. So what is some of the best removals in my life? The first thing that comes to mind is like bad people and negative energy. One of the best joys, I think, of living in Austin and not having a normal job and not being like stuck in the same town is that you get to be very deliberate about who you spend time with. And by being here, everybody that I spend time with, I legitimately really enjoy their company. I want to spend time with them. I'm not spending time with anybody who brings me down, annoys me, who I don't want to deal with, who I have to deal with out of convenience or location or occupation. And that's a huge, huge thing about having a healthier mentality. The other thing, removal, that's biggest impact, a lot of health stuff. So, you know, cutting out sugar, vegetable oils, both huge for health, cutting out any kind of like processed foods, cutting out any grocery stores for the most part. I mean, the only thing we get from grocery stores anymore is sparkling water and some herbs. We're getting all of our meat from a local butcher. We're getting all of our produce from a local farm. And that, I mean, you just feel it in your body when you're getting healthier food. So that's a really big one. And then alcohol. You know, I don't always do a good job of keeping it cut out, but I haven't drank in about a month now, just because I wanted to, you know, take a break. And, you know, as fun as alcohol is, it's amazing how much better you sleep, how much more energy you have in the morning, how much less anxious and irritable you get. It's a really great thing to remove. So that will be pretty high on the list too. What will you do now that you're financially independent? Well, it's nice that somebody thinks that. I guess like it's a funny thing. It's like financially independent is this weird word where it's like, what does that mean, right? Does it mean that you've so much invested in like long-term assets like index funds that you could live indefinitely off the returns? And I'm definitely not there, right? Like that's a very high net worth. Or does it mean that you could live indefinitely off your passive income? Now, this is kind of a deceptive thing because yes, if I stopped working today and did nothing, I could live off the passive income for a while, but it goes away. Like there's not really such a thing as passive income, because as soon as you stop working on the thing that's bringing it in for you, it's going to die off eventually. So financial independence is kind of this funny term. When I think of financial independence, I think of being able to spend most of your day doing things because you want to do them and they produce money. So like I am fortunate to be in that situation where, you know, it's a Tuesday afternoon and I'm here talking to myself about questions on Twitter. And like, that's kind of cool. But then the answer to the question is kind of unsatisfying because I'm just going to keep doing exactly what I am doing, right? And I think that's like a really good goal for anyone is find work that you would do even if it didn't pay you and that you enjoy, but that you can grow to a point of paying you, right? Like it still blows my mind sometimes that I just get to like fuck around and try out different tools and write about it on Twitter and make money from it. It almost feels like somebody's gonna knock on the door and say, okay, the fun's over, you have to go work in a coal mine. Not to disparage coal miners, just like, it's not something I wanna do. And so that's an extremely fortunate position to be in, and I'm just gonna keep doing this because it's really fun. I'm learning things, I'm, you know, getting to play with all of these like new tools. I got like a lab mic now and we got this light ring over here. You know, it's just fun to learn stuff and like goof around and explore, and that's what I love to do. I'm going to keep doing it. What is your view on ambition? Do you see it as something good or something bad? I mean, ambition is really important. If you're not ambitious, it's going to be very hard to, well, it's funny because if you're not ambitious, then you don't care if you don't get anywhere, right? You're very content. And, you know, I think ambition is a tricky word because it is a really good thing for helping you get to a higher, you know, financial, social, whatever status, but it can also be bad if it's making you perpetually unhappy. There are a lot of people who are totally happy just spending time with their kids, spending time with their dogs, working, you know, a fine job and making a good income, and they don't want to grow like a, you know, $20 million business and build out a huge team and launch life-changing products. And I'm in the camp where I do have a lot of ambition and I do want to do things and I want to like build and grow, and I'm not happy being stagnant. And that can be really bad, right? Like it can lead to depression, unhappiness, anxiety. So it's not always a good thing. I think the most important thing is to, harness your ambition to try to do your best work and to succeed and grow and learn, but not to let it become unhealthy where you're beating yourself up, where you're stressed out and anxious and not sleeping all the time. It's, using it for its good qualities, understanding the bad and trying to find that balance, which is really hard and it comes in swings, and that's okay. You just got to recognize when it's no longer serving you. Most voracious readers I know give tons of unsolicited book recommendations. You don't. When and how do you recommend books to people? It's a good question. I find it very annoying when somebody just like throws advice at people. And so I generally try to avoid doing that. I think that unsolicited advice is a really easy way to piss people off. So I don't just say like, oh, you should read this book. Because I also don't want to come off as some like douchey book nerd. So when do I give book recs? When somebody asks for them, obviously. Or when somebody's talking about a specific idea that I've heard in a book. I won't say like, oh, you should read this book. I'll usually say like, oh, have you read, X? Because there's a lot of things you're talking about. And then we'll end up talking about that book. But it's not me telling someone what to do. It's just like, oh, I heard a similar idea in this book. Have you read it? Yeah, unless somebody asks for it, I try not to give it. Because again, I don't want to like tell somebody how to live their life if they don't want to know my thoughts on what books they should read. It's just like not a great habit to have. All right, and then a couple last thing for funsies. Favorite taco spot in Austin? Definitely Descada. It's this little food truck on 11th Street, and they only make one kind of taco, which is their al pastor. They make it with this incredible spicy salsa on it. It's got like fresh pineapple and everything. They marinate the carnitas for I think 24 hours overnight, so when they sell out for the day, they're done. It's just like one guy and 2 employees in their little truck. It's incredible, and they're like this big, they're tiny. So I can eat like 16 sometimes. It's awesome. If you're ever in Austin, you absolutely have to go to Descada. Second to that, and let's say for breakfast tacos, because they don't do breakfast, I would go to Veracruz. Awesome breakfast tacos, really, really good. Fresh tortillas, excellent eggs, everything. Like that's a really good spot to check out. What's one thing you think no one understands about real estate at their own cost? That's an interesting one. And I'll caveat it with like, I don't know very much about real estate yet. Like I'm just getting interested in this world. I'm just getting into it. I'm not an expert on this. So, I don't really know anything either. But one thing that comes to mind is a lot of people underestimate the psychological benefits of buying a house. And there's this common financial advice that, oh, you'd actually make more money if you took the down payment and put it in index funds and then just like kept renting. But then you're renting, all right? And you can't like do whatever you want. You could get kicked out if the landlord decides that they don't want to do it anymore. Could get your rent hiked on you. We ended up deciding to buy a house relatively quickly last year, and it would have been easy to say like, oh, we should hold off and wait, but I'm so happy we did, not just because of the appreciation and whatnot, but because there's so many fun things you get to do just by like having a place that is your own. And I think there's something very human about nesting, having your place, and it's just harder to have that feeling renting. So if you're thinking, oh, I want to, buy a house or a condo, but I think that it's a less financially advantageous move, I would say do it, because even if you miss out on a little bit of the long-term financial upside, the psychological upside is really high, and it's just a really great feeling. What is your favorite thing about Austin? There's so many things I love about Austin, but I would have to say the people. I think it just attracts a certain kind of person who has a really good balance of ambition and lifestyle, where all of my friends here are doing really interesting, cool things, whether that's growing an e-commerce business or running a crypto hedge fund or like running a wine bar, like selling $2,000 deluxe coffee grinders. Like everyone's doing really cool stuff, and everyone's very passionate about what they do. They're not like slaving away at these, consulting, banking, tech jobs that they hate. They're super passionate. A lot of them are making a lot of money, and they're all like very interested in really neat things. So the community here is so cool, and I haven't found a community quite like that in any other city. There's also tons of other things. The food is incredible at a reasonable price. It's very small in terms of geography, so everyone's close together. There's incredible amenities like Barton Springs, this amazing cold spring that you can go swimming in and that I often meet up with friends at early in the morning for like a cold plunge. There's just like all these little hidden wonderful things about it, and I'm just so excited to have found a city that I love this much that I know I'm probably gonna be in for the rest of my life, and to invest in building a community, building roots, helping build the city even over the next 20, 30 years. That's really magical to me. So thank you everyone for sending in those questions. Again, it's just Eliason on Twitter if you enjoyed this. Let me know if you did enjoy it, because maybe I'll do more of these in the future. Could do them through YouTube and the email list and whatnot. And I'm gonna have a couple videos up here. Haven't decided which ones yet, but they're there. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks, everyone.